Hey everybody, it's MP, Small Field Drafts. Today we're going to be doing just one quick 3-team best ball draft on Underdog. So we're going to take the 10 minutes that it takes to complete this draft and then spend a couple minutes at the end going over the team. And throughout this video, I'm going to give you 3 tips that you can use, 3 actionable tips that you can use in every single one of your 3-person drafts that will help establish an advantage over your opponents. So I am at the 101 spot here, which ties in perfectly with my first tip that I'm going to give you, and that is draft Christian McCaffrey at 101. Now, it's not a hard and fast rule, but the reason is, as I've talked about a lot recently, my research has shown me that it's the running backs that have more often been able to reach the high tier outcome over the wide receivers. So over the last 4 seasons, there have been there have been more than twice as many running backs that have scored 300 plus points. And in fact, Christian McCaffrey even scored 400 points one year. I think it was like 9-4. There were 9 running backs compared to 4 running backs who have scored in this format, half PPR, 300 plus points. So we want to give ourselves the biggest chance of having that right tail outcome, that 300 plus point outcome, by drafting Christian McCaffrey. Second of all, it's not just Christian McCaffrey, it's also Austin Ekeler. The profile of the running backs that can score that many points are the ones who have a path to catch a lot of passes, have a path to 100 targets. Now, specifically in this draft here, it went Christian McCaffrey at 101, Travis Kelce at 102. They're trying to establish their positional advantage at tight end. And then Team 3 got a very interesting draft. Jefferson and Chase, then Hill. Now we're going to go for Austin Ekeler here. We're doubling up what I think are the top 2 running backs, the only ones on the board who have a full rushing load and a 100 target possible outcome. I'm doing this because I do think Cooper Kupp, while obviously not as high up as Chase or Jefferson, I do think he belongs in that top tier of wide receivers. So I want to make sure that I'm establishing my own positional advantage at running back while also not falling behind too far at wide receiver. From here on out, I do want to also be drafting as many of these top 10 wide receivers as possible. I know I've talked about this a lot, but we're just going to hammer it home again. Bijan Robinson is a guy who I don't think has that outcome where he can get 100 targets this season just because of Atlanta's offense. Plus, we haven't seen him. That's why I think Austin Ekeler is such a better bet than a guy like Bijan Robinson. So back on the turn, we got 2 picks here. Bijan is falling down, so the people in this draft do seem to be recognizing what I'm talking about. Even Tony Pollard went ahead of Bijan. You don't see that quite often. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for 2 more running backs. Again, hammering home as many of these wide receivers as possible. Who do we want? Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, and Amon-Ra. I think I like Amon-Ra and Garrett Wilson. Devontae Adams, there's rumors of Hunter Henry leaving the Raiders. There's rumors, right, of Jimmy G's health not being Jimmy G's not being on the team at the start of the season if his foot doesn't get healthy. That is a concern, but I think it's been blown out of proportion with the news. But I do think Garrett Wilson, Devontae Adams or Garrett Wilson. Let's just go Garrett Wilson here. I've been drafting a lot of Devontae Adams, and I do like Devontae Adams a lot. I think that he's going to be a target hog. Obviously, Jimmy G is not going to be airing it out like Derek Carr did last year, but I do think they're going to figure it out. What do we have next? Oh, we're getting to the point in the draft where my next 2 tips are going to be pertinent. And that is the ADP is not based off of 3-team leagues. The ADP is based off of 12-team leagues. So that means you can totally disregard ADP. Because the ADP is not tailored to this format, the tight end position is being artificially depressed in the player queue that you see here. Mark Andrews' name barely shows up, and at this point in the draft, we want to make sure that we're still keeping up with the positional advantage at tight end. By drafting Mark Andrews, we're establishing a positional advantage. We're not keeping up with Kelce per se, but we are establishing the advantage over the guy who's not getting Andrews or Kelce. Now, what do we want to do here? Saquon, obviously, you could say it's a value here, but what are the chances that if we don't draft one of the next tier of quarterbacks, that we're not going to get him on the way back? There's 4 picks between us and the next pick. I do think if we let these quarterbacks slip, we probably won't get a chance to draft them. And I want to make sure, again, I'm not falling behind at any of these positions. Who has the path to a higher outcome, Jalen Hurts or Josh Allen? I think Philadelphia is just a better overall team. Their defense is elite, though, which maybe means they won't be putting up as many points because they're going to be winning so early on. But we went with Jalen Hurts. I think he does have a great chance at becoming the overall QB1. So we have a great chance, I think, an equal chance of any other quarterback at having a QB1 season with Jalen Hurts. I think we have the most likely guys to finish as the overall RB1 in both Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. I think they're 1 and 2 respectively. Cooper Kupp, I do believe, has passed to become the overall wide receiver 1. And then Mark Andrews, I do think, too, has a chance, although it's not as big a chance at being the overall tight end 1. And even if he doesn't outscore Travis Kelce, Mark Andrews can still score more points than he did last year. The advantage won't be as big. We got a lot of value by waiting. Let's see, we got him at 18 versus Travis Kelce at 2. We got 16 picks. So we got 5 elite players in between those two. We're getting some good value on Jalen Waddle here, and we also have a stack partnership with Devontae Smith. So while we didn't get more than 3 top 10 wide receivers, we're going to get maybe wide receiver 11. I do like Devontae Smith more just because he stacks and that raises our weekly upside. Do we want to think about taking a running back here? I don't think we want to think about bully balling at tight end yet. I do think some of these running backs are going to be available in this kind of next tier. All these guys are pretty similar to me. We have 4 picks. Everybody has got more wide receivers than they do running backs, so they might be leaning going running back. I consider all these running backs to be in a similar tier, whereas these wide receivers I do think are in a tier above the next grouping of wide receivers. So let's take both of these wide receivers and really cementing, because we didn't get as many top 10 wide receivers as we probably could have because of the fact we took 2 running backs in the first, 6 picks or so. I do think we are keeping up quite well with any of the other teams who might have drafted, say, Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. And we did have a run of wide receivers go off the board. So running backs are falling in this draft. That's something to take note of, that running backs are falling down the board. So we are getting good value on them. That might continue throughout the draft. Now, at some point, I do think that's going to change. Everybody's going to start to hammer those running backs. The third tip I did want to bring up was don't draft 2 of the top 3 quarterbacks. Bully ball doesn't work at quarterback, in my opinion, because you can only be starting max one quarterback on a weekly basis. Or even at tight end, where it's kind of a similar argument, you can theoretically start more than one because a tight end can fit into your flex position. Now, obviously, most week that's probably not going to happen, but it is possible. And I do think the second tier quarterbacks like Lamar and Fields have more of a path at scoring at that QB1 season than the rest of the tight ends like Hawkinson, Kittle. But I do want to keep these guys on my board. I want to keep clicking tight end. Now, we're a little light at running back, but we know that running back's falling down the board. We have a chance of taking Lamar Jackson and pairing him with Mark Andrews. I think establishing positional advantages, doubling up a tier 1 guy with a tier 2 quarterback gives us an extremely high probability of pairing Jalen Hurts, who himself can have a lot of spike weeks, but we're also hoping for him to have somewhere like 24 points per game. That would be a really high-end outcome. And then Lamar Jackson, if he's going to have break-off 60-yard touchdowns, we know that he can finish on a weekly basis with 30 plus 40 points. And we want him slotting in when he has a really high outcome. And hopefully Jalen Hurts is kind of our rock that's establishing that more consistent quarterback 1 season. Now, I was correct in the fact that running backs are still falling off the board. So I think we made the right decision by not taking any running backs in the last round. Now, we have an interesting choice here. We still have 2 of the next tier of running backs, in my opinion. Now, the only thing about Breece Hall, of course, is that he's returning from an ACL tear. So while it's not a huge factor for me, because I think by the second half of the season, he'll be in peak form, and we have enough running backs to kind of tentpole our running back room, I do want to think about playing bully ball at tight end and taking another tier 2.5 tight end, let's call him, because I think Mark Andrews is kind of in a tier all by himself, and cementing our advantage. We don't want to be falling behind at tight end, especially with our Kelce drafter, who himself took the number 3 tight end in TJ Hawkinson. So while we're, a little bit behind the Kelce drafter, because of course Kelce's just in a tier of his own, and he did himself get another top tier tight end in TJ Hawkinson, we're right there behind him because George Kittle, I think, has more probabilities for spike weeks than TJ Hawkinson does. We know that there's a lot of options in San Francisco, but sometimes, especially we saw it with Brock Purdy last year, that he can sometimes hyper focus on Kittle, and Kittle we know can bust off for multiple touchdowns in a single game. I don't think George or TJ Hawkinson has that same range of outcomes. He's probably more of a volume play. Dallas Goedert, we just want to keep an eye on because he is the last tier of tight ends I would consider. Darren Waller, Evan Ingram, the rest of those guys, I don't want to think about, especially after spending a lot of high draft capital on Mark Andrews and George Kittle. We have a very, very solid team here. Now, Breece Hall, he did get drafted. I was curious to see, sometimes Breece Hall falls down in this format because of the fact of that ACL. People are scared because this is cumulative scoring. People are more scared of taking Breece Hall than they are, say, in Best Ball Mania, where Week 17 and the playoffs matter a ton. We need our players to be scoring every week because it just matters at the end of the year who scored the most points total. Every week counts for the same. Now, we only have 5 running backs, but we do have 5 very solid running backs. Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins. We've been tracking DeAndre Hopkins, both his ADP and his where he's favorite to land, and it's changed from Kansas City, Buffalo, Houston, the Lions. Now he's favorited to land in Cleveland. So Amari Cooper and DeAndre Hopkins are both sitting at the top of the board. They're kind of cannibalizing each other, although I do like Cleveland and I do like betting on Cleveland. I don't think it's a bad thing of bringing a guy like Hopkins into Cleveland. I might wait a while if that does happen and see if Amari Cooper falls down the board, because I think if the Browns can show up, we got 7 seconds here. I'm thinking about taking Dallas Goedert and taking the last of the tier 1 of tight ends and really pushing the bully ball at tight end. We're good there. We don't have to spend any more capital. I went for it. So we have Dallas Goedert, which also stacks with our Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith. So we're betting big on the Eagles. We don't want to spread ourselves too thin, right? If we're going to be right on Philadelphia, we want to be right in a big way. DeAndre Hopkins just went. His ADP earlier this week was at like 39. Every day it's gone up steadily, like 1 spot. And right here, he just went at pick 44. It doesn't correlate the same exactly as it does in the 12-team leagues. But if we can get Amari Cooper to fall to us, I don't hate that. Obviously, if DeAndre Hopkins shows up in Cleveland, it probably lowers the ceiling outcome for Amari Cooper. But we know historically that great offenses, top 10, top 5 offense, can support 2 wide receivers in the top 12 fantasy finishes. So if we're getting him at wide receiver 20 or something that I think he is, that's not a bad value. Where else do we want to be looking? Aaron Jones, this last tier of running backs, or this kind of next group of guys, I think none of them really separate. Joe Mixon, I do think, can have a sneaky top 5 running back season because of the fact there's nobody really behind him. And just as I mentioned in the beginning, we want to search for those running backs who have a path to 100 targets. I think he could get there. And we'd have 6 running backs. We'd be good. How many more picks do we have? We only have 2 more picks. So spending 1 on Joe Mixon right here, we probably don't need to do. Keenan Allen, Jerry Jeudy. There's no Baltimore Ravens here. Christian Watson, we know he has freak athleticism and he can blow up on any week. Yeah, we drafted Joe Mixon just because I don't know who else I'm drafting here. And I don't really care if I miss out on Christian Watson, where I'm probably going to be a little tilted if Joe Mixon gets swiped out from under us, just because I do think he has that huge range of outcomes. Alexander Mattison is an interesting guy. There's been a lot of reports recently that Dalvin Cook is imminently going to be cut from the Vikings. In fact, by the time, I'm streaming now, it could have already happened. I don't know what they're going to do. It was probably smart of us as well to take a running back there because, of course, we know that the rest of our league has been waiting on running backs and pushing them down the board. And the last tip, bonus tip. I said I was going to give you 3, but here's another free tip. I usually want to leave the draft with more wide receivers than I do running back because on average, you're starting 1 more wide receiver per week than you are running backs. Now, things get a little wonky in these three team formats because all the players are so high scoring, are so high producing that some of this wisdom that I'm bringing you might not correlate as well as I think it does, but I do think that it is directionally correct that we need to be starting more wide receivers on a weekly basis, just because you're definitely starting 3 as compared to definitely starting 2 running backs. We're going to take Keenan Allen here as our last pick. There's nobody else that I really love. Maybe Terry McLaurin, Drake London again. We're kind of fading Atlanta. Keenan Allen, maybe we're betting big on the Chargers, and if he's going to be their number 1 guy. Obviously, Mike Williams is more of the downfield threat, the big big time play touchdown guy, which probably suits his half point PPR format more than Keenan Allen does. But Keenan Allen is a better wide receiver than Mike Williams, so we're just going to kind of play it like that. And I think we ended up with a fantastic team. We're strong everywhere. We're elite at quarterback. We're elite at running back. I think we're keeping up at wide receiver, and I think we're a little bit behind the Kelsey drafter just because. But because of the fact that we went bully ball, there's probably not going to be too many weeks where we're posting a total dud in our tight end slot. Now, let's compare our teams to our opponents and see how we fare. Going over our roster just once more, Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson, great. Christian McCaffrey, Austin Eckler, top 2 guys in my opinion in this format. Then Josh Jacobs, who is the only guy in Las Vegas. If he can get the workload that he did last year, I think that he can make our lineup more than a few times. Ramondre Stevenson, again, he might be the only guy in New England, although there is rumblings of them picking up guys on third down. You never know with Bellatrix what's going to happen. Jahmyr Gibbs is a rookie, of course. We're not expecting him to have a huge workload, but we are expecting him to be a big-time pass catcher. We know that the Lions are missing Jameson Williams for the first couple weeks of the season, so maybe that means Jahmyr Gibbs is going to have a bigger role than he otherwise would have. And who knows? We're not expecting Jahmyr Gibbs to have a big red zone work, but you never know. It could happen. He could fall in the end zone a couple more times than we're expecting. Something could happen to David Montgomery, and Jahmyr Gibbs is going to absolutely explode. And then Joe Mixon, a guy that is not loved by the market for probably good reason because he wasn't very good last year. They've been taking him off the field on third downs and in passing situations for the past 2 years in favor of Samaje Perine. And I think at the time, a lot of us were like, why are they doing that? Clearly, Joe Mixon should be on the field. He's the better option. And then in the Super Bowl, they were scheming up the play when they needed a touchdown, needed something big. They schemed up a play to Samaje Perine, but they just got rid of him. And it turns out Samaje Perine was actually very good. Shout out to the old Washington football team running back there. Joe Mixon, of course, now that it's totally bare in their running room, and Cincinnati were expecting to be an elite offense, so he could have that extreme right tail outcome, maybe a bit more passing work, and definitely we know Cincinnati's going to score a lot. Cooper Kupp, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Garrett Wilson, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Amari Cooper, Keenan Allen in our wide receiver room. So we have a third of the top 10 wide receivers, and we did get Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith at good value. Amari Cooper and Keenan Allen, I feel fine about rounding out our wide receiver room. And then tight end, Mark Andrews, George Kittle, and Dallas Goedert. Let's see how that compares to our boy D-Boy over here. He's got 3 quarterbacks in Patrick Mahomes, Justin Fields, and Justin Herbert. That makes me smile because I think it's a total waste of capital, and you're only shooting yourself in the foot if you're drafting 3 quarterbacks, especially when you don't have any bye weeks overlapping so that you felt like you had to. Obviously, he's betting big on both Justin Fields and Justin Herbert and saying these guys can have huge spike weeks. They can fit into my lineup. But I think most weeks of the year, you're expecting Patrick Mahomes to be there. And I'd rather just take one of these guys and spend the capital elsewhere. So I don't feel like we're behind this guy at all. I feel like we're the same in terms of what our possible outcomes are, but I think he just wasted his last pick at that quarterback position. So we're probably making up that value somewhere else on our team. Running back, Tony Pollard, Saquon Barkley, Derrick Henry. I think we're crushing him at the top of our running room in terms of our top tier outcomes. Although Tony Pollard, no one's going to be surprised if he has a top 5 season. Same with Saquon Barkley. Derrick Henry, of course, could surprise everyone by leading the league in rushing, having more touchdowns than expected if Ryan Tannehill's going to be the quarterback for the whole season. But we can also see how this thing could fail. Dallas could sign a guy. Saquon and the Giants could just not be as good. They signed a whole bunch of guys to just throw the ball to. Daniel Jones is a rushing quarterback. Derrick Henry and the Titans just suck. Need I say more? Breece Hall's coming off an ACL. He's probably not going to be totally healthy at the start of the season. So in a format where every week of the season counts for exactly the same, that's going to be kind of detrimental, especially when you don't have that top-end talent at the top of your running back room. Najee Harris, again, is nothing. He's probably a descending player in terms of his value in the league. He's maybe going to be ceding more work to Jalen Warren, especially on passing downs, and Pittsburgh's just not going to be a very good offense in general. Now, J.K. Dobbins is a guy that I like on Baltimore, although we just know that Lamar Jackson is a rushing quarterback, and usually rushing quarterbacks don't correlate to higher performances from their rushing running backs. But I do like Baltimore. I think they're going to be a great offense, great team this year. They're going to score a lot of touchdowns, so I do like J.K. Dobbins. Wide receiver. So at running back, I think we have an advantage over him. So I think we're even at quarterback. I think we have an advantage at running back. He's got Tyreek Hill, Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams. So he's got 3 top 10 wide receivers as well, 2 more of those middle guys, and then DeAndre Hopkins and Christian Watson. I think we're pretty much equal at wide receiver. And then tight end, he went Travis Kelce and TJ Hawkinson. So Travis Kelce obviously gives you a natural advantage over everybody at tight end. But if we can maybe say that Travis Kelce had an outlier season last year, even though he's been the tight end one for like the last 7 years in a row, an outlier season in the fact that he outscored the rest of the tight ends by 4 or 5 points per game. If we can bet on the rest of the tight ends scoring a bit more. TJ Hawkinson, I don't think he's an elite tight end in any way. And Minnesota, I don't think they were frauds last year. Definitely. He definitely turned it up when he was traded from the Lions to Minnesota. I'm trying to come up with reasons why we're not being crushed at tight end, but I think we have enough talent, enough top tier talent in Mark Andrews, and enough depth of tier 2, tier 3 talent with Goddard and who else did I get? Kittle. Enough spike week potential, probably more so than he has here with just Kelce and Hawkinson. So I'll give him a little bit of an advantage right there at tight end. So I think we're even at quarterback with better value. I think we're crushing him at running back, if I do say so myself. I think we're even at wide receiver, and I think he has us beat, but only a little bit at tight end. So that's not too bad when you draft a guy like Kelce. All right, our last guy here who was at the 3 spot, quarterback Josh Allen, Joe Burrow. Okay, that's what I like to see. 2 quarterbacks, one of them being the top tier guys. No one's going to be surprised if Josh Allen finishes QB1. No one's going to be surprised if Joe Burrow has an incredible season and outperforms expectations. Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb. We know he got great value on Bijan Robinson, especially for a guy who's usually going in like the top, I don't know, let's call it 10 picks. He got him at pick 15 here to start off his running back room. So waiting on running back definitely seemed to be the way to go. Probably because I took what I consider to be the top 2 running backs in Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler in the first 2 rounds. But let's see, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, Nick Chubb, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, Alexander Mattison, and Aaron Jones. So while I do think our top end talent is higher, I think he has a lot of outs for these, probably call it 3 guys here, Bijan Robinson, Jonathan Taylor, and Nick Chubb. No one's going to be surprised if they have top 5 running back seasons, top 3. Top 1, maybe Nick Chubb. Again, I can see if he has more of a passing workload than we're possibly projecting because there's nobody really behind him. Jonathan Taylor, they used 3 or 4 different running backs last year at different points. Anthony Richardson and a rookie quarterback who runs the ball and has a huge cannon for an arm, probably not checking down too many times to Jonathan Taylor. I don't think there's any outcome where he has 50, 70, definitely not 100 targets. Bijan Robinson, again, Atlanta, I don't think they're going to have that many targets. Then Kenneth Walker, Alexander Mattison, Aaron Jones. Travis Etienne as well in there. I'm just going to kind of pray that these guys, you seem to be maybe not reaching, but picking guys who might totally bust, right? Like Alexander Mattison, has he been all that good when he's been on the field? Maybe Minnesota signs another guy. I don't know. Kenneth Walker, they did draft Charbonnet in the 2nd round. Aaron Jones, Green Bay is just going to be whatever. Travis Etienne, they brought in like 3 other running backs to reduce Travis Etienne's role. So I do think we have an advantage, although I do like his running back room a lot. And he got 7 running backs, very robust. Probably too much draft capital spent there, like maybe especially in the back half, and especially grabbing Alexander Mattison, maybe saying I want to be ahead of the curve, but you don't need to do that. You don't need to pull the trigger on that until the moment comes. You're not necessarily getting any closing line value between now and later in the season. Each draft is its own game. Now, wide receiver, this is where he shines because he was able to get Justin Jefferson and Jamar Chase back to back, then AJ Brown and CeeDee Lamb. So he's got not only the top 2 wide receivers, but then he's got 2 more. So 4 total top 10, 2 out of the top 2. And then DK Metcalf, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley, kind of like tier 4 wide receivers in the back half of his wide receiver room. Really great. I can see why he went a robust running back room because of the fact he's so top heavy at wide receiver. I definitely understand that more. Then at tight end, I think this is where he is the weakest. Kyle Pitts and Evan Ingram. If we can just say that Atlanta, he is betting big on Atlanta, so I don't hate that. He's correlating his Atlanta. So if he's going to be right on Atlanta, he's going to be right in a big way. Although I do believe that running back and tight end more so cannibalize each other. So that's probably what we can say in favor of ourselves. If I had been drafting Kyle Pitts as my tight end 1, I would have hoped to grab another guy like Goddard, another one in that same tier. I don't think Evan Ingram is in that tier. He's just another guy to me. Everybody is drafting Jacksonville like they are a top tier offense, but that's more of a projection. And so I do think there are a lot of outcomes, more so than is being baked into their average draft position, where the Jacksonville Jaguars just fall flat on their face, and especially Evan Ingram himself. So I, again, say we're even, maybe a little bit of an advantage because we have Lamar Jackson. He does have that rushing upside that I don't think Joe Burrow has. Jalen Hurts can keep up with Josh Allen any week of the year. Running back, we have more top-end talent. He's probably got more of that second-tier talent. And then he's got a lot of just guys in the back half that are whatever to me. I don't foresee too many weeks of the year where those guys are filling in for him. Now, wide receiver, of course, he's going to be crushing us with Jamar Jefferson at his wide receiver 1, Jamar Chase as his wide receiver 2, and A.J. Brown as his wide receiver 3. Maybe we can say we mitigate a bit of his advantage with A.J. Brown because of the fact we have Jalen Hurts. So any week that A.J. Brown goes off, Jalen Hurts is also going to get some of that pie. And we're kind of counteracting his advantage with A.J. Brown by the fact that we drafted Devontae Smith. So if we can say A.J. Brown's not going to do as well as he did last year, and Devontae Smith is going to be able to turn it up. Dallas Goedert, who we also have on our team in our tight end room, is going to be able to turn it up. This guy's probably our biggest competition, just because he's got so much elite talent and so much depth at both the running back and wide receiver positions. That's where the meat of your points are coming from. But I do like our chances against him. I think we're beating him a lot at tight end. So that was a lot of fun. I hope this was helpful, insightful. 3-team drafts are a lot of fun. That was the only one we're going to do today, but I'll leave you again with my 3 tips. Tip number 1, draft Christian McCaffrey and Austin Eckler. You don't necessarily have to draft them at the 101 like I was doing, but you want to make sure you're getting those guys as much as possible because I do think they have the highest chance of scoring that 300+ point outcome of all the running backs on the board. Second tip, draft Mark Andrews. Because of the fact that the ADPs in this format are based off of a different format, you can disregard them completely, and that means that tight end is being depressed in the queue. Remember, click on Mark Andrews' name at the beginning of the draft, make sure he's starred in your queue, and draft him like a pick or two before he usually goes. He usually goes around that pick 19, 20, 21 range. So when you see that part of the draft coming up, it's so easy too because there's not a ton of other guys that you're falling over yourself to draft, like Jalen Waddle, Chris Olave, those type of guys. So draft Mark Andrews. And the third tip, don't draft 2, definitely don't draft 3 of the top 3 quarterbacks. You can get away with drafting one of the top tier guys and then one of the next tier guys like Justin Fields, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, even a guy like Herbert, who I really like. Or you say to hell with drafting a second strong quarterback and just wait if you're going to draft Josh Allen, and then a guy like Deshaun Watson in the very last round. I think that's more than applicable. So don't draft 2, definitely don't draft 3 of the top 3 quarterbacks. And that's going to do it for me today. Again, this is MP, Small Field Drafts. Tune in with me throughout the rest of the offseason. We're going to be doing much more of these small field drafts. 3-team drafts. We're going to do some 4-team drafts, some 6-team drafts, maybe some higher stakes drafts instead of these $3 drafts. But this is a lot of fun. We're going to learn a thing or two along the way. Hopefully, we can make some money as well. Thank you, everybody, for joining me, and I will see you